passionate, driven, enthusiastic, euphoric. This is who we are as entrepreneurs. But how we leverage these incredible attributes to dream and build businesses that scale and grow is what this podcast is all about. Hello, I'm attorneypreneur Josh Brown, and welcome to Franchise Euphoria. Hello, welcome back to another episode of Franchise Euphoria. We are going to be talking about inbound marketing today, and I'm thrilled to have Tom Schwab here to talk just about that. He is a pioneer in inbound marketing, a leading industry consultant, author, and speaker. He grew his own business, Goodbye Crutches, from a regional direct-to-consumer company to a national leader. He's the owner of two companies, Goodbye Crutches, the direct-to-consumer medical equipment company, and Inbound for e-commerce, a leading e-commerce inbound consulting company. Hello, Tom, and welcome.
Hey, Josh. Thanks for having me.
Well, I'm thrilled to have you because so many franchise owners and franchise businesses, they just don't understand inbound marketing, inbound this. What's all that about? I got to run a business. And I get all that. But today we are going to hone in right on that very issue because it is so important for these businesses to start waking up to the notion of inbound marketing. So let's jump right in and tell, what is inbound marketing?
Well, sometimes the easiest way to define something is to define the opposite. And I think everybody knows what outbound marketing is because we all hate it. It's that interruption marketing, and it's spam email. It's the unwanted calls. It's the junk mail that comes in. And it's really somebody standing there yelling, I've got a product to sell you, and it's about me, and my product. And that's outbound marketing, and it really turns people off. And the flip side of that is inbound marketing. So it's more of a permission-based, where you're there to be helpful, to solve people's problems when they have a question. And right now we've got so many great tools in the internet that empowers you to do that by answering questions online with blogs and podcasts like this one, and then asking people what you can do for them. And there's so many automated systems that you can do that it's a wonderful way to go ahead and very cost effectively attract customers, engage those leads, and really delight your customers so that they become advocates for you.
Yeah. So essentially, it's creating content and creating other materials that invites people in who are interested in whatever you're doing, as opposed to bombarding them with garbage that they don't want to get. Is that accurate?
Exactly. And when you have a question, where's the first person or first place that people go to search? Nowadays, it's going to Google and putting in your question. And of course, you always see the top ones in there, the ads of somebody trying to sell you something. But the ones that really build trust and value and start a relationship with a company are those ones just below that, the blogs, the guides, those answers that really answer the people's questions. Because if you look at it now, the research shows that 70% of a buying decision is made prior to the customer ever contacting the vendor. So customers are out there finding answers, finding resources, and those people that are out there helping them and educating them, they're the ones that are building trust, and they're the ones that are getting the sales. And they're getting the sales at a higher value because people trust them more than somebody that's just, trying to sell on, click here, take this postcard, or, buy on a picture and a price.
So you're a seasoned entrepreneur. You've built a great company, Goodbye Crutches, which I'd like for you to take a minute to talk about and tie it in specifically to how you've utilized these inbound principles to grow and scale that business.
Well, I thank you for the compliment of seasoned entrepreneur. I just think that's the way to explain my gray hair. But what we started with was a small company in Western Michigan, and basically it was a sideline company. We made the majority of our profits selling orthopedic implants to hospitals and physicians, and so we had this line of knee scooters and crutch alternatives and things to help people after surgery. Now, when the economy started to turn, the distributors, the manufacturers of the implants, they wanted to buy back the distributorships. And it was clear that, that model was going away for us. So we looked at that as an opportunity to sell back the distributorship. But with this business, we knew we were having such a great impact here locally. Half the units would come back with thank you notes, and we thought there's a need, and we're really fulfilling it here. But the question is how do you go from being a regional player to a national player? And so, we started on the avenue of e-commerce, and we played on eBay and Amazon, but it always seemed like you were chasing a transaction, not building a business or a brand. So, we played around with a little bit on pay-per-click even, but we looked at that and said, once again, it's just, you're trying to, just trade dollars for dollars, and that's not building anything. That's just an arbitrage system. So with that, there was a book written by two really smart guys out of MIT called Inbound Marketing, Brian Halligan and Dharmesh Shah. And they talked about how the world was changing and how people that were winning were the ones that were doing permission-based marketing, and they were putting out the content there to answer people's questions. And at that time, nobody was really doing it in e-commerce, and we thought it makes sense, so let's try it. So for about, I guess it was about 4 months, we changed some of our structure and said, could we go ahead and use this content to attract visitors? So we started a blog and basically just started.
Well, let me interrupt you right there. I hate to interrupt, but it's such a perfect jumping off point. I mean, I've got to tell me about when you say changing your structure, because for you in your mind, I think it's clear what you did. I think it'll be instructive for the listeners. What do you mean when you said you change your structure? Because I think a big roadblock for a lot of people getting into inbound is the fear of what they have to undertake to do so.
Right. And for us, it was really, okay, now do we spend all this money to buy traffic? And that was, postcards, direct mail, pay-per-click. And to me, that was always a spend. You spend it and the next day it's gone. It was like drugs. You got a fix, but then the next day you had the withdrawal unless you took another fix. And so we said, okay, how can we invest in growing a business? And it was a big mindset because it's contrary to what most people do with their advertising or their marketing dollars, buy an ad, see the results, and then buy another ad. Well, we looked at and said, can we invest in content that's evergreen, that people will find over and over? And so with that, we went ahead and started to answer some of these questions that we were getting continually from customers on the phone or through emails. And we just tried to be helpful with the content. And so we put up some blogs there, and we were amazed. Not only did they get traffic to them, but they got shared in social media and amplified. And they also went and drove traffic back to us. We could actually see where people were coming from reading a blog to interacting with us and buying our product.
So give an example of a type of blog. And I really want to dive into a little bit of the details here because, like I said, I think it's so instructive for people to actually hear a real world example. And you've got such a perfect example case of the success that you can have with an inbound strategy. So I imagine you're writing these blogs and talk about that process of how you're deciding what to write on and then what you would write on.
Sure. Really, it's not. It's what your questions that your customers are asking, and not things about your product. Sometimes we're the worst people to write our own blogs. Nobody wants to hear all the features and specifications. They want to know the benefits. So, and a common question might be one of our great blogs is, how can I drive with crutches? Or how can I drive after surgery? So going ahead and talking to them and answering that question, and then giving them some alternatives to crutches. Another one that's very common we've got different buyer personas, but our Mary the Motivated Mom buyer persona. One of the great questions is how to cook on crutches. because, well, if you're holding crutches, it's really hard to carry anything. It's hard to safely do anything, and most people can't go 6 months on takeout, or 6 weeks on takeout food. So
what I love about that is that these are real world questions that your identified target market or your identified customers actually have and actually experience. And so instead of trying to come up with, fancy articles or anything else like that, it seems like it's a matter of, hey, what kind of questions does my target market have? What kind of questions do my customers deal with? And these kinds of things where, how can I cook on crutches? How can I get from here to there? I mean, those are just very practical, real world questions. And you just created, it sounds like, blog posts around that.
Exactly. And most of the blog posts were things that, we weren't that creative. We were just repeating what our customers asked us and answering it and trying to find out the answers to help them. And so when we did that, we built trust, we built authority. We got amplified because people would share these on their social media, and then they would come back to us. And at the end, we could talk about some of the products that we had, or at least they were on our site and could see other things. And from an e-commerce site especially, it was so different. Even now, if you look at them, most e-commerce sites, it's nothing but a picture and a price and click here and buy now. And so it's all focused on selling as opposed to serving and helping people.
And so now, was this before you started using HubSpot?
It was.
Okay.
We're cheap, and I'll be honest with that. And HubSpot at that time was a very expensive tool. We were spending about $4,000 a month in pay-per-click, and HubSpot was going to be about $1,000. And for something that really hadn't been tested and really hadn't been shown at that time for e-commerce, I wasn't going to sign up for a 12-month contract with that. So really, we hacked it together with a lot of free tools at the beginning.
So this is important because the average franchisee owner operator is probably going to be looking, if they've never done anything online, they've never experienced inbound marketing, they're probably going to be looking, just like you did, for what's free, what's cheap, what's quick, to kind of ease into the game a little bit. And I think HubSpot as a tool is fantastic as you get more sophisticated with it. But I love this theme that we're on here during this interview, which is, how can somebody who's never done it before, like a franchisee owner operator who's just grinding away, trying to build a business, trying to drive traffic into their location, how can they utilize these free type of resources, and how can they do it in a way that's going to be most effective and not overwhelming?
Right. And from that standpoint, I always talk about that inbound is a strategy. It's a way of, hey, I'm going to be helpful to customers. I'm going to answer their questions, going to nurture them with automated emails. And all of these things can be done with free or low-cost tools out there. Our first blog was just on a free WordPress blog. But after a while, for us, it took about 4 months where we realized that the free tools worked, but I always talk about an iPhone. I spent $400 on an iPhone recently, and somebody would ask, well, why would you spend money on that? You can get a free flip phone, you can get a free camera, you can get a free calculator. I could probably even go out and get a free old 8mm a video recorder, and I could carry all these things around for free. But at a certain point, there's a lot of value in having something that was designed for it, that all works together, that makes it easy. And really, that's when we went onto that tool. But as far as the strategy goes, the strategy applies to anything, any company, and you can use it with any tools.
Well, yeah, no, that's great. I mean, and now you actually help people, right? You help people with the strategy and consulting. Talk a little bit about that and your services, again, from the perspective of people who probably aren't as familiar as you are with these strategies, because I think just getting down to the basics and just getting in the game. I mean, I know for myself, that was a hurdle to jump over. Now, I did that a few years ago, but for a lot of people, they're just now starting to realize the advantages of this. Talk about some of the services and some of the things that you do to help people make that move.
Sure. To me, the strategy is the most important part. Everything else is tactics. And from my background, I went to the Naval Academy, and there was always something where we talked about that strategy wins a battle, not the tactics. And I think too often as entrepreneurs, as business owners, even as sometimes early adopters, we look at it and jump from tool to tool. Well, this thing is neat. I just saw an article that I'm supposed to be on Facebook, so I'm going to jump on that. Or I think I should write a blog, so I should start doing that. And if you do any of those little pieces, they might work, but they might work against each other too. It makes a whole lot more sense if you sit down and step back and say, what is my strategy? What am I trying to accomplish? And that's really what we do with our coaching and consulting to businesses, to talk about, okay, what are your goals? What tactics or what pieces could be put together to achieve those goals, and then which ones are most important? There's a million things you could do, but there's probably 10 that would have a big impact on your business right now. And the first one that we always go through with our customers is, defining that ideal buyer persona. Who is it, that person that you were talking to? Because as you write, as you do a website, as you do a product, it's not for everybody. There might be 7 billion people in the world, but you don't have 7 billion customers. It's much, much better to figure out who that person that you can serve well and you can help, and focus on that person. And once you do that and understand them, boy, the content just comes from that. And it makes it so much easier to find out ways to help them, to find out ways where they are, and really to engage with them.
And I don't want to put you on the spot here, but I think for a lot of people, when they think of a buying persona, the average one you'll hear is, I work with people who are 25 to 35, and here's a few other characteristics. I would love if you could read off one of your buyer personas to give an idea to people of how specific you really need to be and how much of a benefit it is to do that.
Yeah, well, the buyer personas are actually on a poster in our hallway.
Really?
So we've got 5 different buyer personas, and if you would have warned me, I would have grabbed one of them before I got on this call.
That's okay.
But really, what we look at is not only the demographics, and that's what everybody talks about. Mary the Motivated Mom is one of our buyer personas for Goodbye Crutches. And now the demographics are the easy part. It's somebody 30 years to 50 years old, married, has kids, may have a job, a net income, middle class or above, and all of those things are the demographics. The demographics is what the Census Bureau knows about you, and those are important, but that's not a persona. That's census data. Really, what you get into the persona is the things that are called psychographics. And those are the things that only your best friend would know about you, or your spouse. And those are the things that motivate you. So, things like for Mary of what's her frustrations? What's her fear? One of her fears is feeling useless. She's got a family to take care of. She's got kids to take care of. Her fear is that her kids will die in 4 weeks if they've got to eat pizza every day that their dad brings home. Her fear is what will I look like? What will I look like on crutches and a cast while I'm recovering? Her struggles are maintaining her image. She fears gaining weight, getting out of shape. Those are the things that really motivate her. And then we look at it too of where does she get her information? And that tells you where to start socially amplifying it. That persona is really on Pinterest. So going ahead and showing pictures there really has driven our sales. You look at it and say, what influences those people? Are they influenced by other people, other patients? Are they influenced by doctors? And sometimes even when you talk to one persona or another persona, it's very important to recognize which one you're talking to. If you're talking to a franchisee or franchisor, that's two totally different people. And one of the things that we really found out was we've got two personas. One of them's called Andy the Active Athlete, and that's that person that's 20 to 30, male or female, that hurt themselves doing something stupid, but probably something fun, and they think they're indestructible. Well, on the flip side of that, we've got Jerry, the on-the-go grandparent. And what we found is that if you don't identify early on who you're talking to, you can really turn them off. So example, if we've got a blog or an article about Achilles recovery guide, what to do when you've blown out your Achilles. Well, that's usually a sports-related injury. Well, if we start going ahead and putting pictures of somebody's grandmother on that blog, they're going to look at that right away and say, oh, man, no, I'm not using a walker that my grandma would use, and it turns them off. Whereas the flip side of that is that if you took their grandparent and wrote a blog on how to be safe on crutches, how not to fall during the winter safety tips, things that would appeal more to that buyer persona. Now, if you go ahead and put a picture of their grandchild on this device, the first thing they're going to think of is, oh no, I could never do that. My balance isn't good enough. And we actually did testing of that and proved that we could kill conversion rates. We could make people leave our site by not addressing who they are and not matching who it is. So with that, we always say that, whatever we write, whatever piece of content, whatever email we communicate with anybody, our first question of who are we talking with? And then what are we trying to communicate?
I love that. That's a really good illustration that you just gave there, deciphering between two different people, the athlete, the grandparent, and so forth. And, it's just really about, getting to the fears, the pain points, the things that actually strike a chord with those people. So that is fantastic. I'm curious, for a typical franchisee owner who may just have a basic website, what are some things, maybe a couple pointers, as we finish off the interview, because there's a lot we could talk about, but I think this would be instructive. What are a couple pointers that people can do today to take what is probably a stale and stagnant website and make it work better for them? Because after all, that's really what it's about. How can it work better for their business?
Exactly. And if it's not making money for you, it doesn't make sense. So you look at it and say, how can you optimize that? And websites used to be billboards or brochures that people would come to once to get information and then go from there. If you go ahead and start putting helpful content on your website, people will keep coming back to it. So just set a goal of your top questions that you get asked every week. Answer one of them a week. And you probably have the answer already because you've been emailing it twice a week to people. So take that email and make it into a blog post. And what's a blog post? It's just a page that has a story in it, typically about 500 to 600 words. And with that, go ahead and post those on your site. And what you're going to find is that when somebody asks you that question, now instead of emailing them the answer, you might go ahead and email them a short answer and say, hey, you can find more information. Just go to this page or this link on a blog. They're going to go to that and they're going to read that and say, wow, there's a trust and authority, and they'll probably start finding other things there. And if you can start being a resource to people, you're going to start being a thought leader. I mean, we've from a B2B side, we went up and we were able to pick up distributors from overseas that we weren't even targeting, but because they had seen our content out there, they thought, wow, these guys are thought leaders in the U.S. We would like to work with them in Canada, UK, and now Australia. So I would say that would be the first thing. Start answering people's questions online.
Well, that's a great point, and it is amazing to me. I think we've all seen it, that anybody who's engaged online long enough and subscribed to this philosophy and been putting out, I'm always amazed at who will contact you. I mean, you'll get contacts from literally all over the world, and it's fascinating and intriguing, and a lot of times it leads to great business opportunities. I mean, it's fantastic, and so that's really, really good, Tom. And I can. I serve as an example of someone. When I first got into doing inbound marketing, I tried to do it all myself and figure it all out. And what I realized through the course of time and pain and wasted money and all the other stuff was that I am not the right person to do that. Now, I learned a lot of mistakes that I could pass on to other people. But what you realize is that you got to hire the professionals like yourself. And so what I would recommend for anybody who's on the cusp or on the edge or thinking about whether or not they want to dive in or how to do it, to reach out to you and talk to you, because I think you will be able to help them and frame that for them. What's the best way to get a hold of you?
Sure. You can go ahead and email me at tom@inbound for e-commerce. And this year we've also started another platform sort of on the inbound philosophy called Inbound Movement. And basically what we do is we take real questions from real business owners. And you can call in the question, you can send a video, you can even go to inboundmovement.com and leave the question right there. And what we do is we'll take that question and we'll answer it from an inbound perspective. So you get your question answered. You also get a little bit of free PR from as we promote this. And what we hope is that everybody can learn from each other, because most of the questions are very common and we all face the same struggle. So if we can learn together, we can be better and we can serve our customers better. And ultimately, that's where the value comes for business.
That's fantastic. I mean, I really appreciate your time, and I think it was very, very instructive, and I think digestible for people to take and actually implement, which is exactly what I'm hoping for. So thank you for sharing your insights, and look forward to staying in touch and having you on another time in the future.
That would be great, Josh. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for being with us today on the Franchise Euphoria podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to go to iTunes and provide a review. Also, please remember that although Josh Brown is a licensed and practicing attorney, nothing contained in this podcast should be construed as legal advice, because it is not. The information contained in this podcast is general and educational in nature, and none of it should be relied upon as legal advice. That being said, if you have questions for Josh and would like to contact him, please email him at josh@franchiseeuphoria.com. Thank you so much for listening, and we hope you tune in to our next weekly episode.